And this afternoon, Speaker of Parliament, Alban Bagbin, is raising fears that there may be civil unrest in the West Africa sub-region, including relatively stable democracies such as Ghana, if immediate steps are not taken to protect the country's governance architecture. In the next 24 hours, heads of state and government representatives will converge at the ECOWAS headquarters in Abuja over the political situation in Niger, where the presidential guard seized power in a military coup d'etat. An attempted negotiation made yesterday by ECOWAS to dialogue with the military regime failed yesterday owing to what is being described now as the unavailability of military leaders to actually meet the peace talks that was planned for yesterday. But the statement and the situation in Niger, the fallouts from the failure of the negotiation, is further complicating the delicate political situation in the West Africa sub-region, which has at least 5 successive coup d'etats in the last 3 years. Ahead of that summit tomorrow, there's a need for us to hear from some of the key stakeholders going into that meeting, and also some of the political watchers analysing the situation. We'll be hearing from the Speaker of the House shortly, Alban Bagbin, who's been addressing a lecture last night pointing to the situation happening in the West Africa sub-region. But let me bring in my guest first. Emmanuel Kwesi-Bajira is a member of the ECOWAS Parliament. He's also MP for Ho West. Adama Gaye is a Senegalese author and a political analyst joining us from Düsseldorf in Germany. Mukhtar Momoni Mukhtar is the Executive Director for the West Africa Center for Counter-Extremism, joining us from Senegal, which is another country that we need to be on the lookout for because of the number of issues happening there. Gentlemen, thank you for spending some time with us. Let's start off with this expected meeting that we're set to have amongst the heads of state from the ECOWAS region. Yesterday, the planned negotiation jointly done by the UN, the AU and ECOWAS failed to happen because of what is being described as the unavailability of the military regime to meet the ECOWAS. And the military regime is also responding to say it's because the sanctions are still prevalent. So let me start off with you, Adama Gaye. The point about the failure of this negotiation. What will be the impact on the attempt by ECOWAS to find peace?
It will be a very serious blow to any effort at ECOWAS to negotiate a peaceful outcome of this crisis. ECOWAS started off on July 30th at its previous head of state summit by flexing its muscle and saying that it is ready to go to war in order to restore democracy. The weaponization of African politics in ECOWAS was the wrong way to start with. And in the situation that Niger finds itself, the junta, they realized that they got the support of the African population, they got the support of neighboring countries like Mali and Burkina Faso, they get the support of Algeria. They know that the whole world knows that it was this kind of intervention that created the mess in Libya. They know that behind the effort at militarism in Niger, one can see the lack of legitimacy that the president of Nigeria, who is currently the chairman of the ECOWAS organization, because he was not properly elected democratically, his election is being challenged in court. And also, many of these civilian leaders were calling for military intervention. They are not really clean when it comes to democracy in their backyard, in their home countries. So, truly, the ECOWAS is in a tight corner. They don't have the credibility to intervene, and the countries and organizations they are trying to bring on board to support their muscling of their foreign intervention, they are also problematic, because everybody knows that there is a country behind all this, that is France. And as a former director of communication of ECOWAS, I know from the beginning that it was not always easy when ECOWAS decided to intervene. When it intervened for the first time in Liberia in 1990, it took it 13 years before the war ended there, before democracy was restored. So definitely, by allying behind France and allowing somehow foreign forces to use the United Nations, African Union, ECOWAS, especially France, this is a serious blow to the credibility not just of ECOWAS, but of the African proposition under the African Union. So the mediation is a problem now.
Right. I was just about pointing out that you have extensive experience working with the sub-regional body ECOWAS, and I recall that at the time you worked closely with the likes of Jerry John Rawlings when, of course, there was a lot of instability in the region, starting off with Sierra Leone and then the Liberian situation. There was indeed a deployment of ECOMOG 1 and 2, if you want to term them as such. But looking at the situation in which we find ourselves now, would you say that it is justified for the forces to go into Niger now?
Look, let's be realistic. ECOWAS doesn't have the mandate to intervene militarily. In order to intervene, it ought to get the support, the clearance of the United Nations. That is the rule. Secondly, somehow it needs to get the support of the African Union. So to wake up overnight and say we are going to intervene without even having the hardware, without having the intelligence, unable in their own countries to fight security challenges like terrorist and jihadist organizations. And overnight you say you attack Niger, which is a country of 1,200,000 kilometers square, which is used to military coup. When I was a young student in journalism, my first country I visited in Africa was Niger. It was in 1978. Then the country was ruled by the first coup maker in that country, which was Senekunche, who took power in 1974 August in that country. Ever since there has been coup and challenges to democracy in that country.
I see.
ECOWAS should be more subtle, more agile in intervening in these places, coming up with different software instead of using the same hardware approach to foreign policy, saying that they can intervene militarily to oust whoever. And you want to restore Mr. Bazoum? Bazoum was a coup maker, civilian, in this regard, because he didn't win the election. It was Mohamed Usman, actually.
Okay, these are, and Adama Gaya, we need to accept that these are claims you're making on your own accord, because the official documentation reflects that indeed Mohamed Bazoum won the election. We're dealing with the official records we have now.
But the official record is something that is not always the reality in Africa. Because what we are facing now, we have to be candid about the reality of democracy in Africa. Civilians, when they come, they try to entrench themselves and they practice what is called one man, one vote, once. Once you vote them in power, you don't get a chance again to even eliminate them democratically. So it was an election organized by Mr. Yusufu, who had designated Mr. Bazoum as successor, who made as Prime Minister Mr. Mahamadou Oumoudou, with my former colleague at ECOWAS. But they did not win the election. And this is the reality. And at the end of the day, if you do so, you are, at the end of the day, losing out. And this is what happened. Mr. Bazoum has a problem of legitimacy. And this is what ECOWAS should take into account in addressing the problem.
Here's what I want us to do. I want us to look at the ECOWAS statement, and then I'll bring in Mukhtar Momoni Mukhtar. We also have the Honorable Kwesi Betra, who's a member of the ECOWAS Parliament, joining the conversation. But just before I bring you in, Mukhtar, the point about the statement that ECOWAS released yesterday, we can just take a look at that, pointing out and admitting clearly that it did not have a meeting. So excerpts indicate that the mission was aborted following a late night, quote, a late night communication from the military authorities in Niger indicating their unavailability. That's what ECOWAS is telling us, to receive the tripartite delegation made up of the UN, AU and ECOWAS, as we understand, on that mission. The planned mission was part of the continued efforts to find a peaceful resolution to the current crisis in Niger. And as per the decision of the ECOWAS Extraordinary Summit on the 30th of July 2023, the community will continue to deploy all measures in order to restore constitutional order in Niger. This is a worrying part of the statement because at the end of that summit on the 30th of July, it was the same point at which we had the military option being on the table. We've seen the military chiefs themselves to that meeting. Mukhtar Momoni Mukhtar, I'm just wondering if ECOWAS is giving us a signal that they may go in now.
Well, it's a worrying situation for everyone who is following the developments. It appears that ECOWAS is still on the same spot at the same point where they were on the 30th of July when this summit happened. Of course, we are being told that the military leaders are not willing and are not ready to host them or allow them into their airspace. And in fact, this morning, we picked up signals. Our intelligence on the ground shows that there was a flight from, Abuja towards Niger. And in fact, it did go into Niger. It did go to, Niamey. And I think that the suspicion we had was that they did not have permission to land. And so there was some kind of movements around, the airspace within Niger, and they had to go back. I am not sure the details of that delegation or who these individuals were or the purpose for which they were in Niger. But what is worrying is that it appears, in spite of all the commentary and all the opinions from all, stakeholders within the region, ECOWAS is not, revising their approach to dealing with the situation. And that is very, very worrying. I think all actors, all stakeholders who have expressed their, opinions and expertise in terms of what the potential implications are, have been very, very direct in terms of what it means for all of us regionally. And yet we do not seem to see any significant shift or any move from what ECOWAS, stood on the 30th of July. And so it is important that we need to increase a layer of engagement to ensure that ECOWAS's response is reflective of what the general response is, the general position of the of the entire West Africa is. Other than that, we may have an individual or a few group of people who would bring this upon us, exert their influence and then lead to a situation of insecurity and instability within the entire West African space. And I heard the previous senior citizen make the comment in terms of this implication on security. We are already dealing with a very difficult situation of violent extremism in West Africa. In fact, the statistics we have right now, in the last 6 months, we are recording over 4,600 fatalities just within 6 months, over 1,800 attacks. We are moving towards the record of 2014, 2015, when this region was the deadliest region for terrorism. In the last 15 years, everything shows that we have been incapable of containing the terrorist violence in the region. Coupled with the current economic situation, the economic instability, a Niger situation will further destabilize all of us. And we should be, speaking loudly and acting more, strongly to ensure that we do not have an intervention situation for all of us.
In fact, that's the fear we all have. You are in Senegal. Senegal has a peculiar challenge, and we'll feed that into the conversation because Adama Gaye is also from Senegal. We also have Emmanuel Akufo-Addo, who's a member of the ECOWAS Parliament, joining us. Just before I bring him in, I want us to listen to the Speaker of Parliament, Ghana Speaker of Parliament, Alban Kingsford-Bagbin, who's also been wading into this decline in democracy across West Africa. He's worried that relatively stable democracies such as Ghana may witness an uprising. Just listen.
That the space of development cannot match up to population growth, with a resultant high rate of unemployment and its attendant security risk and instability, which we are witnessing. There are so many others I could add. But let me tell you that because of this, reversal of democratic gains in Burkina Faso. I used to visit the president of Burkina Faso and the parliament and speakers. I used to go there. And I was able to link a number of businessmen from Ghana to their partners in Burkina when I was deputy speaker. Look at what is happening there. Almost about 70% is being controlled by terrorists. So they run the schools, they run the health sector, they do everything there. No government is there. Mali, Guinea, and Niger, these are not palatable narrative for the profile of our sub-region. It's as a result of this that the trust and confidence that voters had in democracy have been trumped. And that is why some of the earlier speakers said some people are preferring military rule. to the democracy we are practicing. But even the military men and women, well, in military you don't have women, you have only men, they themselves don't want to intervene because the cost to the military is immeasurable. They kill each other more than they kill the civilians because of the distrust, the injection of disunity among the personnel of the security agencies. So even after they return to constitutional rule, they keep on killing each other. It takes time to settle down. So they know the cost now. They are not interested. What we should be afraid of is civil disobedience and civil revolution, as happened in Egypt. That we should be afraid of, and we should all guard against. And let me give you a bit of research into this. In recent years, surveys, researches, and experiences shared by both politicians and observers of the political space show a worrying emerging trend. What is coming to the fore the world over is that the public generally holds those they elect into office, as well as democratic institutions, in very low esteem. Very, very low esteem.
So the Speaker of Ghana's Parliament there, Alban Kingsford Bagbin. It's the reason for which I also want to hear from the Honourable Emmanuel Kwesi-Bedzua, who's a member of the ECOWAS Parliament. And I recall meeting you, Honourable, in Abuja. That was earlier this year. And as part of the deliberations, you, the members of Parliament from the ECOWAS Parliament, were concerned about instability in the entire region. Next election happening at the time was the parliamentary elections in the Gambia. You were there as well. Now you're back, and all of a sudden the region is still experiencing this situation of unrest. First of all, what's your take on the decision by the heads of state to going with the military? And are you of the opinion that that will be the safest option as they meet tomorrow?
Well, thank you very much, Bless, and thank you so much. Thank my co-panelists, Mutari as well as Adama. Yes, indeed, I am worried, and I'm not too happy that the head of state have decided to go the way they are going now. We just returned from our delocalized meeting in Liberia, and that was about 2 weeks ago. And one of the things that we look at is political inclusivity in democratic governance. And we have some of the CDS and some political actors who are military officers coming to talk to us at our committee level in Liberia. One of the key things that we learned has to do with exactly what has happened. In fact, we were there when the coup happened in Niger, and the chief of staff, defense staff of Liberia, just said, well, we're just discussing this. It is a coup. And we have a colleague of ours from Niger.
Really?
Who was part. So currently, my colleague, Abdullahi, is still in Liberia, being hosted by the Liberian government. Now, when we had the announcement of the coup d'etat, our first inclination was that, well, this thing has happened again, and what is the next move? And then we heard that the chairman and head of state of ECOWAS has sent a delegation, that was the Benin president, to go and negotiate with the military junta in Niger. We heard that it wasn't successful, he has to return, and then there was a summon of all the heads of state in Abuja, and they went and they decided that, well, the next leg of action was to have a military intervention in Niger. But at our meeting, at the ECOWAS delocalized meeting, we thought the first move, which was a democratic and diplomacy, would have been the best. You know, talking to the military junta, finding solution to the problem, would have been the best than the second option, which is the military intervention. Just as Adama has mentioned, you need the collaboration of African Union as well as the United Nations to be able to move into a sovereign state where they have, removed a democratically elected government. You cannot unilaterally, as a regional body, move in there. Having said that, one of the things that I have learned during our delocalized meeting has to do with non-inclusivity of some of our military personnel. And I'll give a typical example. When the CDS was speaking, he mentioned that, well, it is not the military per se that are, making a coup in these countries. It is rather the presidential guards. The presidential guards who are protecting the president. And normally in these countries, you have presidential guards who are different from the normal military structure.
Right.
And so the presidential guard sees us political leaders, and he just mentioned in passing that if I'm a presidential guard who comes from my tribe and knows everything about me and knows where I'm coming from, he knows my poverty level or my everything about me, and all of a sudden my maid servant decide to steal about $1 million from my wardrobe, what would that military personnel who is a presidential guard do? Because he knows very well, he knows everything about me, because this is our president, they decide to pick people who are loyal to them, especially from their tribes.
Right.
And he mentioned that, and it took me aback. And I said, well, it is because we are not including the military hierarchy in decision making when it comes to political decision. Who's supposed to be your presidential guard? Is it your brother? Is it your family member? Or you just pick people from the military setup and form your presidential guard? Check out from Burkina Faso to Guinea Conakry to Mali and Niger, they are all presidential guards. And so we are beginning to fear that this movement, 4 of our neighbors, 4 of our brothers who are no longer members of ECOWAS because of the sanction, will affect us economically, militarily, and every sphere of our life in the region.
Okay.
So, it is not today. It is in Niger, and from the analysis that giving us, we have 2 more to go before the end of this year.
2 more coup d'etats to be witnessed.
2 coup d'etats to go, and that should be a worrying trend to all of us. In fact, from all the speakers who came to talk to us, we have 2 more military personnel, 2 more coup d'etats region to go before the end of the year. And so this should be a worrying trend to all of us, whether we agree or not. We had it last year, Abuja, and it has happened. And now they have predicted that there will be 2 more.
Okay.
And so what are we going to be doing? What are we doing as a sub-region?
That's a great question you are asking, because tomorrow these same leaders will be meeting. There are other considerations that must be on the table, and some experts are advocating for, and not just a fixation on Niger. You were just pointing out that 2 more coup d'etats likely in the West Africa sub-region. And Adamagai, let's hear from you on the meeting that's about to happen tomorrow. Should we go just beyond Niger? Because you're from Senegal, and I'm glad that Mukhtar Momoni is joining us from Senegal. That's also another burning area.
Absolutely. We need to have a broad-based conversation about the situation in West Africa, in Africa indeed. Let me tell you what happened in 1999, in June 1999, under the then OAU, the Organization of African Unity, which was replaced later by the African Union. There was a summit in Algiers. I was there. And in that Algiers summit of June 1999, the decision was made to end the military coup in Africa on a principle, a contract. Under that contract, African countries would be led by civilians, but the military will return to their barracks. But they will be in charge of security, border control, and some civil engineering and military engineering to support the development of their countries. On the other hand, those who are in power, the civilians, would be practicing good governance, rule of law, respect of democratic norms. That is the contract that was worthy for Africa, but it was not respected by the civilians. Those who came to power in a democratic manner, quote unquote, with civilian clothes, They behave like autocrats. What are the military autocrats? So this is the problem that we face, and that should be discussed. If they didn't go back to the drawing board and address the problems that Africa is facing in depth in its democracy, rule of law, and behavior in a democratic manner by those who are elected, then you will continue to have military coup.
We're also seeing, just to bring that as you dovetail into the meeting tomorrow, the involvement of superpowers. It's been alleged, in fact, just yesterday, the U.S. Secretary of State Blinken pointing out that the Wagner Group is taking advantage of the situation. Some are also accusing the French government. Accusations all over the place, but it's pointing out to some geopolitics that's also coming into this.
Yes, absolutely. We are now living almost the end of the Cold War. At one point, the Soviet Union withdrew, and there were only the West in all over the world controlling it. Remember, Francis Fukuyama saying that the end of history, the Western democracy had won. Now, Russia, BRIC countries, China, Turkey, Brazil, they are trying to play a role, and they know that Africa is a continent full of riches, and now there is a new scramble over Africa on geopolitical terms. But some of these people coming in, the Russians and others, they are trying to prop civilian autocrats, whereas the Western nations, they are trying to reawaken the colonial past that they have had in that region. So we are facing now ourselves to be in the middle. The reality is Africa should drive its agenda, its narrative, and decide on it in an open conversation. The problem is, even a country like mine, Senegal, that used to be the beacon of democracy, is no longer. By the way, I'm speaking to you from Düsseldorf, from Germany. Why? Because in Senegal, I've been writing on African issues, including on the mismanagement of the country. Overnight, they decided to arrest me, throw me in jail for 53 days without reason.
So you were in jail. You were in jail for 53 days because
yes,
you were critical. You were critical about your own government.
Absolutely, and this is the problem. If democracy is debate, is contradictory debate. We used to have it in Africa. I remember people coming to Ghana, President Rawlings, President Kufuor, the actual president Nana Akufo-Addo, President Mills. I know them well. I'm a Ghanaian, by the way. I love the country. And when Ghana was back in 1996, we did a special report in Jeune Afrique, the leading French newspaper, entitled Ghana is Back. It was democracy, and we saw it also in other parts of Africa, including in Senegal. But what we are facing now is some kind of people who take advantage of them being elected and just deciding on everything, on the resources of the country, on the freedoms of the people, on the opinion of people. And when you say no, you are thrown into jail. This is the problem that West African leaders, when they meet tomorrow, they need to come to grips with the reality. And Western nations coming to talk to us, they should be clear about the reality of Africa instead of coming with a blueprint that is the same thing always, or you have to restore constitutional order.
Right.
No, if you don't respect the rule of law, you are toppled. And this is obvious.
Okay, let's bring in Mukhtar Momoni. Mukhtar, we just heard from Honorable Emmanuel Beja pointing out that the indication they are getting, and probably that's from the ECOWAS early warning mechanism, that there may be 2 more coup d'etats before the end of the year. In your network as well, at the West Africa Center for Counter-Extremism, what data are you picking up on this as well?
Well, of course, it's difficult to dismiss that, that point that there could be more coups. There could be 2 or more coups in the region before end of year. In fact, 2 years ago, when we saw the first coup situations happen, it was easy for us to predict that we would have more coups even before the end of the second year. And here we are. We have had 6 coup situations. 6 coups and attempted coup situations have happened within that space. If you look at all the 4 countries that have had this, all of them rank very low in the Human Development Index. It points to the fact that these things are a product or a manifestation of the incapacity of our states and leadership to provide, what I call the entitlements of leadership. And this relates to issues of job creation, economic opportunities for people, as well as social amenities, and issues of good governance. These things significantly are very, very fragile in many more other countries than those that we are currently looking at in terms of the coup situations. And so the reality is that we have very vulnerable countries, more vulnerable countries that could, fall to, to coup situations in the sub-region. And we have to take very, very practical measures, measures that are practical, measures that are consistent, the measures that are effective to ensure that we build a culture of resilience against coup situations from happening. It is almost too late now to talk about these things in terms of putting in place measures to prevent coups. We may have more coups before we build a sense of resilience and the foundation of resilience against coups within the sub-region.
Okay, let me give the final word to you, Honorable Emmanuel Kwesi-Bajara. The point about the Speaker raising concerns that even in Ghana we are democratically stable, except to say that there may be an uprising if we do not take steps to guard our democracy. Your final words on that as we wrap up.
Yes, I perfectly agree with the Speaker that the happenings in the country could may cause some uprising with citizens in the country. Yes, you know that people are complaining, people are talking. It might not be a military coup in Ghana, but it could be civilian uprising. It could be civilian situation that could cause, all that we have done, all that we have gained as a country. And so we need to dialogue. We need to talk. We need to speak to each other. I believe that there should be an inclusivity. We should include others in our dialogue. Bless the youth in the country, for instance, in this country, not only in Ghana, just as Mutare has mentioned, the democratic dividend that we have chalked, it's not helping anybody. People are hungry. When it comes to job for our youth, are not there. The economy is in a bad shape, not only in Ghana, but in the whole of West African sub-region. And then when it comes to even the election is another thing altogether. We finish election and you have to go to court. You have to go to the judiciary for the judiciary, to judge or to lead, to come out with their verdict. But those judiciary, as we go through the various countries, to realize that even the judiciary are being the appointees of the president who is in power, who you are going now to judge. And so we also whether this democracy that is good for us or is not good for us. We need to rethink because of, just as my brother has mentioned, we are at the end of Cold War. But unfortunately, we are starting all over again. And if you are not careful, all that we have gained as a continent will go back, into shadows.
I'm grateful, gentlemen. Emmanuel Kwesi-Bajara, member of the ECOWAS Parliament and also MP for Whole West here in Ghana. Also to my good friend Adama Gaye joining us from Düsseldorf in Germany, and also to Mutare Mumuni Mukhtar joining us from Senegal. I'm grateful, gentlemen.